Hi there, this is Maryal Concepcion, your host of the My DPC Story podcast. Have you or someone you care about ever been burned by the U.S. healthcare system? If so, you are listening to the right video, because if you are listening, chances are the answer is yes. But the U.S. spends so much on healthcare. Why are so many Americans affected personally and especially financially by the healthcare system? Shouldn't that mean we have better healthcare access and treatment options? Shouldn't it be easy for us to be able to see our doctor when we need to instead of turning to the ER or urgent care? Historically, it's been seemingly impossible to answer these questions. But now that is changing through the direct primary care movement. This video that you have tuned into will bring you into the world of direct primary care and show you how physicians all over the country are changing the way they practice so patients from all backgrounds get the high quality care they need and deserve, which makes for both happy patients and physicians. Learn even more by subscribing to the My DPC Story YouTube channel. Find us on all major podcast platforms. Find us on socials at My DPC Story and at mydpcstory.com. There you can find resources including how to find a DPC doctor near you, conferences about DPC, DPC startup guides and advice, a store with DPC swag, and even a mapper showing where podcast guests are practicing. Thanks for tuning in to hear about this powerful movement. Now, on to the episode. Direct primary care is an innovative, alternative path to insurance-driven healthcare. Typically, a patient pays their doctor a low monthly membership and, in return, builds a lasting relationship with their doctor and has their doctor available at their fingertips. Welcome to the My DPC Story podcast, where each week you will hear the ever-so-relatable stories shared by physicians who have chosen to practice medicine in their individual communities through the direct primary care model. I'm your host, Maryal Concepcion, family physician, DPC owner, and former fee-for-service doctor. I hope you enjoy today's episode and come away feeling inspired about the future of patient care, direct primary care. Patients pay their doctor a low monthly membership and, in return, build a lasting relationship with their doctor and have their doctor available at their fingertips.
Direct primary care means to me that it's the way you're supposed to practice medicine. You're allowed to now do what you always wanted to do, be the doctor you always dreamed of being, because you're not limited by third parties who are pulling at you, and you're actually just dealing with the patient, which is the way it was supposed to be. I'm Dr. Doug Farrago, and this is my DPC story.
Dr. Farrago received his Bachelor of Science from the University of Virginia in 1987, his Master's of Education degree in the area of exercise science from the University of Houston in 1990, and his medical degree from the University of Texas at Houston in 1994. His residency training occurred way up north at the Eastern Maine Medical Center in Bangor, Maine. In his final year, he was elected chief resident by his peers. Dr. Farrago has practiced family medicine for 30 years, first in Auburn, Maine, and then in Forest, Virginia, where he founded Forest Direct Primary Care in 2014, which quickly filled in 18 months. Dr. Farrago invented the knee saver, a padding that relieves knee stress in baseball catchers while he was in medical school, and then went on to invent the cryo helmet worn by people for migraines, heat recovery, and head injuries. Dr. Farrago created the Placebo Journal in 2001 and also penned the Placebo Chronicles, his first book, before creating his website authenticmedicine.com, where Dr. Farrago still blogs every day. He lectures worldwide about the present crisis in our healthcare system and the effect it has on the doctor-patient relationship. Dr. Farrago has written 3 books on direct primary care: The Official Guide to Starting Your Own Direct Primary Care Practice, The Direct Primary Care Doctor's Daily Motivational Journal, and Slowing the Churn in Direct Primary Care While Also Keeping Your Sanity, all bestsellers in this genre. He is a leading expert in direct primary care as a model and lectures medical students, residents, and doctors on how to start their own DPC practices. He retired from clinical medicine in October of 2020. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Farrago.
Oh, well, I'm really glad I can be here and talk to you.
Can you bring us back to the early days when you were moving to a new location in Virginia? And can you tell us about how was the reception of DPC when you moved to the community?
Well, so I was in Maine, and at that point, no one was doing this in Maine. And that was 2012. I've been there since 94. And then I was in a fee-for-service, actually F2HC, for 17 years. And I said that was it. I'd rather quit medicine. But so I decided that I was going to move to do something like DPC. And I moved to Virginia, and then to do that in Central Virginia, because it was an area I thought there was a bootstrap kind of people, that they would be more open to where I was in Maine. And the weather didn't bother me either. And so I spent a year just kind of gathering my thoughts and getting ready, and realizing, by the way, there was no thoughts, or there was no one. There was people doing it, but not many in the country, maybe less than 50. Horrific information out there. People said they would talk, gave information on DPC, but it was really concierge, and it was expensive books that were horrible. So I did about a year of just whatever, urgent care and independent practice, and then decided, you know what, I'm just going to make that jump. And the reception, it was pretty good. I got an article in the paper, and then I did whatever I could, as I put in my books, to just grind and get the information out there, and hit the point where it's a tipping point where you get word of mouth. You get people promoting you on their own, and that's where it went. And so, I figure I was 50 of when I started. Now there's probably thousands of DPC docs. So I'm glad I was able to get this done, and also glad I can write some books to help others do the same thing.
When you were starting out, especially when you were building up to getting that word of mouth momentum, what was your elevator speech to your patients or to people who you were talking to about your clinic?
Yeah, so I have to remind myself of that too. In fact, if you go to dpcbook.com, I bought that, and I used it off one of my talks, marketing talks, that you can write your elevator pitch and put it on there. So we listed them on there. That's all free, dpcbook.com, and you can see elevator pitches. But I think my elevator pitch was basically, in a sense, what if you can give you for a certain amount per month, very low cost, all the care that you possibly can, much more personalized service, and get in and see me with much more time without interest you. And I think that's how I kind of, explained that to patients. And I think, why is my elevator speech not perfect now? It's because I'm retired. And so don't hold that against me as far as I'm not honed in on that right now, but definitely look at that website, because we keep that up. And but yeah, that's how we did it. I think what I really got good is he's trying getting information out there, like putting little bits of cheese out there, so people would the mice would come to the practice, and I can at least educate either by a website, educate by other means, then getting in front of me, and then giving them a meet and greet, educate, and then finally realize this is a great thing, and then give them a great thing. Make sure you give them a great service.
And on that note, one of the things that you have mentioned in the past is the 4 agreements for DPC. So can you tell us what that means to you?
Yes,
please?
It's a great book. The 4 Agreements is a great book, and everybody should read it. It's just kind of a soothing, more an easy way to understand how to deal with life. And I think that book is really important. The 4 agreements are basically be impeccable with your word and truthful, honest. All doctors, DPC doctors, I should say, are like that. We got that covered. And do your best is another one, and we've got that covered. We're all working our butt off. But the other 2 are really hard, because one is don't take anything personal. And you know what? You're putting yourself on the line, the DPC doc. It is an emotional roller coaster. It just is. So all the great things with DPC of not having to deal with third parties, having great patients, there's still an emotional roller coaster when someone leaves you, when you think you didn't do a great job, and you're trying to fill your practice, and people are when they leave you, you take it personally. And then the other part of the four agreements is don't assume anything. And we always assume it's ourselves. We're the problem. And the truth is, even if they say we're the problem, we're not the problem. The DPC docs are the best docs. They work their butt off. They care. They give time. And, the truth is, if patients leave you, 99.9%, it's money. It's some other reason in their life. And they may say it's because you did this and that. It isn't. And so I would say those two things, as you're going along, as patients turn over, don't assume anything. Don't take it personally, because it's a tough job. DPC is a different type of, not really burnout, but because it's a lonely sport, it's a solo sport. You don't get to commiserate as well. And so things like this podcast that you're doing, and thank you for doing it, gets the word out that, we're in this together, and there is no more supportive group than other DPC docs.
Doug, on that note, during your years at Forest DPC, how did you overcome those challenges if you started, taking things personally, or if you were questioning if you were doing your best, or if you were making assumptions? How did you get through those moments? Yeah,
so for me, again, it was a solo sport. So one way is, and I do mention this, I think, in my first book, but really connecting with other DPC docs who are willing to connect with you, and you become great friends. It's amazing. Because we were early, I'm still connected with some of what you'll call the bigger names in DPC to this day, because we were early. For no other reason. And we would, by Facebook groups or talking by instant messenger or DM each other or call each other, we had each other's back. We would meet at conferences, party, hang out, and those are my best friends now. So I can count at least a dozen that are my best friends. And so that they helped me survive. And I highly recommend, and people don't listen to me enough, I cannot stress this enough. Get a group of people, form a Facebook group or some other social media or anyway, a Zoom group, and meet weekly. How crazy is my first book came out? Zoom really wasn't a thing, right? I'm going to try to update my first book. Yeah, you should be meeting with a group of 10 people every month. And you know what? Have a bitch session. So that you realize, oh man, I'm not alone, because it is hard. It was hard for me for that reason until I found friends. So that's we're emotional animals, so we need to have each other. And luckily DPC people are always willing to do that.
Absolutely. And I definitely want to hear a little bit about your books. Specifically, when you mention that we are emotional animals, the book that comes to the forefront of my mind is your motivational journal book. I personally am a huge fan of it. I found it very useful, but I think that could also be like if people are not necessarily having anything to talk about for the week, but they can even just go over like what they wrote down in their journal. I mean, that might even be a good extension of the use of that book. But how was your journey to create those books? Yeah, so I told you in the beginning of this podcast, first, there was no startup guide. The guy doing something about concierge, I forget his name. I bought an expensive book and I read it and I said, this helps me not at all. This is garbage and nothing personal. You know nothing about DPC. And so as I was doing it, I just kept taking notes. Part of those notes even were kind of the motivational journal. But the startup guide was like, okay, I want to get this out there because people shouldn't have to go. You can't reinvent the wheel. I'm doing the same thing. And here's a little secret about the DPC. In 2 years in practice, you're an expert, guaranteed. So you need that book. My third book, which is the churn book and talks more about the emotional roller coaster I just mentioned and some other things and how to figure out why you're having churn. That's for later on, and maybe people need that book. But the second book was the motivational guide because I'm a big believer in just constantly and therapeutically writing things down so that you're like, okay, I did do well. You know, we forget to write the positive things we did, and here's some prompts on did you do this week, and can you do this? And so I kept writing all these things that I could be doing every day, and I realized I can make a whole book for a year out of this for somebody else. Why should they have to go through the same thing I'm doing? And so all of it
is a method of sharing. I don't get rich on these books. Trust me, I don't get rich on these books. But freaking Amazon takes most of the profit. But I don't think people buy the motivational book enough, and that's crazy to me because every week there's no repeats. Every weekend is a review, but every week, every day has a prompt of how to maybe should you reach businesses? Are you taking care of yourself personally? And on for a whole year. You're not going to find that specifically for DPC anywhere else, and it's a great way to just maybe deal with some of the emotional issues and hurdles that we get as a DPC doc. So that's how I came up with it. I'm going to probably update my first book soon, but as I said, I'm kind of moving out of that right now, and there's great people taking over for me, so people don't need to hear from me forever.
Having used the motivational journal book, you have put prompts in there where you're not just thinking about your practice, but you're also thinking about yourself and your future self. I love how in the beginning of the book, you talked about, even consider doing this over and over and over, year by year, just because everybody, yes, we change every day. And so I think that, that was such a great idea. And I'm glad that you put that in the front of the book before starting it. But yeah, I love that you touch on everybody as an individual as well as everybody as an entrepreneur. So thank you so much for your contribution to the DPC movement there.
I listen. I feel I'm like I said, I don't get rich from the books. Trust me, but DPC saved my life. When I would have quit medicine, and so I guess it was really the summer of 2014, maybe. But when I did it, I just couldn't do what I was doing anymore. Now, this is not that everybody has to do it, and I'm not criticizing anybody in fee for service, but I got to say this is the right way with more time. So I feel good about what I did with the books. I feel good about starting the DPC Alliance. Because there's no one making money off that other than the one person who's basically running it, who gets a salary, and he's not even a doctor, but we need someone to do that. I feel really good about that. So I leave with a really good conscience on that, or a clean conscience.
Because you are one of the founding members of the DPC Alliance, what is the DPC Alliance for those who are unfamiliar? And what is the value that it brings to the movement?
So I'll even dig you one deeper on that. So the group that I started with that kept working together in the beginning, that became my friends, and we were being involved in lectures and teaching others. So we were teaching now. We were friends. We were commiserating. And then we'd meet and we said, and that's when actually I came up with the idea and said, listen, guys, here's the bottom line. Who's going to be the voice for DPC in the future? Do you guys want the AMA in any way to be our voice? Because they sold primary care out a long time ago. It's a specialty based organization that's RVU based for procedures. So we don't want that. No. Do you want the AFP? Because their majority, overwhelmingly, is about fee-for-service docs, and they have not had DPC back. So do you want them to say, oh, yeah, we represent DPC as well? No. So who's going to represent DPC when, as media comes calling, or we want to get the word out? Who should talk about it? Well, it should be us. End of story. It should be us. So we are not going to be, we decide, let's be an organization that's not a lobbying group for political reasons. We're just the voice of DPC doctors by DPC doctors. And the authenticity there is extremely important. And then that's how we started it. We just said, yeah, let's go forward with this. And it slowly built up. And we put all our money to do this. None of us got paid. In fact, we volunteered our time, put money in for dues. And it continues to get stronger and continues to grow, which is phenomenal. And we have great new young voices in this. And then we have a way, with Joe Grundy to have someone who's very smart to kind of, highlight what's important so that the media understands it. And it now becomes your voice. Do you feel that with the AFP for DPC? You probably will never. And so if you really want to support DPC both in the media near you. If you want to learn about DPC, all that's there. And that's now should be the focal point for it. There's good information on DPC Docs on Facebook. Great. I think that's phenomenal. I think podcasts and everything else is great information. This is just going to be the voice. And then in there, we negotiated deals with organizations because we can do that as far as getting discounts on stuff. And again, nobody working for the DPC Alliance makes money except one dude. And now go look at the AMA and AFP and look how much money they're using and what are they using it for. So I am very proud that this thing has blossomed, and it would break my heart if it doesn't continue to flourish. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I think it's crystal clear that this is a group very representative of the heart of DPC. We're all in this to help, each other and to help get the movement to go forward. So thank you so much for sharing that.
And people, if you're listening to this, join the DPC Alliance. Yes, you got to pay some money every year, but that money is literally going to expand the voice of DPC 100% tax deductible because it's part of your business, and and you are now paying it forward.
And for those who are interested and looking for the DPC Alliance, it is at dpcalliance.org, and it's also on the resources page on the podcast website. So if you're looking, please go to that website, dpcalliance.org. I have become a huge fan of podcasts. Ever since Sarah Koenig hosted the first season of Serial, I was hooked. Now, creating this podcast has become part of my daily life. While it is an exciting new hobby, I also see it as a privilege that I get to interview so many DPC and direct care doctors. If you are interested in starting a podcast, let me tell you a little bit about Anchor. First of all, it's free. There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast as well with no minimum listenership. It's basically everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Again, it's so exciting to talk with you, and I wanted to highlight the fact that you have gone from fee-for-service to opening up your DPC, and now you have transitioned from your DPC onto life after DPC. So could you please share with the listeners, how has that been for you and what's on the horizon for you?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So I'm 55. That's one thing. I'm a little older when I started my practice in DPC. So I really don't want people thinking I left DPC because I was not happy with it. In fact, my practice was full and I sold my practice. And I'll go into a little detail into that as well. But for me, I made some decisions. I've had, nothing personally, physically well. But I just thought, if the right guy comes along or right woman comes along to look at my practice, because I'm not going to advertise it because that's a risk for patients if you do that, I'll entertain the thought, and I'm going to let the universe tell me, because I've always wanted to do some other things in life. I've always written. Obviously, we talk about books. I've had 2 inventions. I like doing other things. I've never in my life not had medicine come first. And then these things were my little side things to keep myself sane. I'm like, what if I just got a chance to do it up? And so at 55, my wife's a couple of years older than me. My kids are out of college finally. I paid all their loans. I'm financially stable. I'm like, if something happens, I'm not a huge town, but if someone comes by and I will entertain this thought. And someone came by. And so I vetted him fully. He was a great doctor. He worked at the Mayo Clinic. Then he worked in my town as in the faculty of the residency as well as the medical school. And this guy was good. And I'm like, I'm going to take this chance in life. And I've always taken risks in life. And, my practice was on autopilot. People don't realize that, when you start building a practice, you got to put them to bed. You got to get all their information, get their stuff under control. And then after a while, after a few years, they're pretty controlled because you've done a great job and money's coming in. It's not a hard job. I could have done it forever. So it was one of the most difficult decisions I've ever had to do. Say, you know what? I'm going to make it. I'm going to jump. I'm going to let this guy take over for me. I didn't gouge him at all on what I sold it for. I won't go into detail. I went to a little detail on my update of the book, but not much. He paying me over 5 years, so we really didn't have to put much into it. And we did 3 months of transition so he can really understand how to do it. And he knew how to take care of patients. He's about 10 years younger than me, but it was just about learning the system, which he did. And for me, I just said, okay, October 1st will be my last day. It'll be 30 years since I started medical school. I know people think we should be a doctor forever, but I'm not a doctor. I'm still a doctor. But I wanted to step back. There's great people, both in the DPC Alliance, teaching others. There's people writing books other than me. I'm not needed. And so let's see what happens. So it's only been a month. I have a place up here in Maine in the mountains, and I've been here for 6 weeks to just kind of decompress. Part of me is really learning how not to always want to do something. So I'm actually going a little bit insane, but I'm trying to figure it out. And I will, I've put feelers out to see if there's opportunity to help in the DPC world, but it has to be perfect. I won't help. I really don't see myself helping brokers or the wrong people. And I'm always willing to help individuals. So I've got my tentacles, out there, but nothing may happen. I don't need anything to happen. I'm financially secure, not extremely rich, trust me, but I can make it until my retirement comes in. So I'm going to play it by ear with that. And then I'm going to look at other things that I've always wanted to do. Like I said, writing is one. I've had some other ideas I'm playing with, and we're going to see how that goes. And I've never given myself a chance since I was a kid to kind of say, okay, medicine now is not my life. Let's just see what happens. So we're more than a doctor. It's okay to be more than a doctor, and it's okay to work until you're 75 as a doctor. I'm not against that, but for me, I just want to give myself an opportunity to see what happens. So I don't see myself going back into medicine. I'll support anybody, and DPC is in my heart forever, so I will always support DPC, but I'm just going to kind of sit back and see how weird this thing gets.
I love that even as you're sharing this part of your life, this part of your medical journey, you're so filled with enthusiasm. And the idea that you've lived 30 years past medical school, opened and transitioned away from your DPC, and you're still enthusiastic, it gives all of us hope in terms of, the people who are starting out or the people who are a few years in practice. You haven't lost yourself. So that's huge to hear that enthusiasm in your voice, and congratulations on making this transition and making a jump, because it's, life is constant little jumps, and this is a big one for you. But as you figure out your life and what life holds for you, all the best, because you're doing what's right for you.
Thank you. And I haven't lost myself. I haven't found myself. Here's the thing. I'm just getting started. I think at 55, I want to see what else is out there. I've said this before, but people laugh when, a football player retires. Yeah, he's played 9 years as a pro. It's like, well, I've been 30 years in medicine, and it's a great job. And I don't begrudge anybody who goes 70 years. So it's a lot of work. It's great to help people. But people think it's weird. Oh, you retired so young. I'm like, I didn't really retire. I'm just going to do something else. And I just want to see what happens, because I don't want to say ever, what if? Why? I just want to see if I can do it. So I DPC. It's not like I needed. I proved myself in DPC. Now I'm done. That wasn't it at all. Because if I had DPC at your age, I would have been gone for another 15 years. So it's 55. You see immortality a little bit. Right. And so that's why I'm like, okay, you know what? My son lives in LA as a writer. I've never been to see him. It's because it's just really hard. He's been there for 5 years. That sucks. Right. So I've seen, he comes home a lot, but I've never seen where he lives. My son in Boston comes home a lot, but I've been to his place once. And so okay, you know what? There are some things I'm giving up a little bit for my career. And now that I'm older, should I keep doing that? No. You know what? Everything is aligning. I'm ready to move on. There's some great doctor taking over. My wife is ready to move on. Let's just do this. So we did it. And again, if I was 30, I would go for 15, 20, 25 years. But I'm 55. Hair is fully gray now.
Doug, let me ask you about when you decided to transition and when you found that right doctor to fill your shoes at Post-DPC. How was the reception by your patients, and what sort of questions did you get, and how did you handle those?
Yeah, so we really had a look at that a lot, right? So here's the thing. You're selling a practice, and I sold it. I wanted him to have the full amount when I probably took over. Now, it takes time to go through lawyers, contract, transitioning with education, getting him used to it. So it took about 3 months. So there's a risk of those 3 months, people leaving. And so I think people are loyal to you big time. But if you can educate them and pump this guy up. So I did that, I announced it. And I did it in a way that it was very hard for me, but I have a great guy. You have to trust. If you trust me with your care, you got to trust me with this doctor. So you better not hire somebody you don't trust, because your reputation is on the line. So I trust this guy tremendously. I gave his education. I did an interview with a video with him and put that so they can see that. And so we didn't do meet and greets with him that as far as like a open house because of COVID. This is a really weird time to do this transition. But we did that as and kept telling them and warning them and explaining how things are going to be the same. My staff is going to be the same. The system is going to be the same. The actual office equipment and the pictures are the same. It's just not going to be me, and they'll live, and let me just say that people should not, I learned this a long time ago, but there was another episode where some patient told me a story that it could convince me. As good as you think you are as a doctor and how important you are in people's lives, and you are, they're going to get past you and they're going to forget you. And so you would say, no way, I delivered their kids, whatever. Trust me, this is the way life is. I had a patient that cracked me up. This guy said to me, I'd asked him about his last doctor. This guy had been with me for 5 years. Yeah, my last doctor, he said, I walked into the office, extreme abdominal pain, and then passed out. And he actually scooped me up, shut his office down for the day, and drove me to the ER. I guess he had an acute surgical abdomen. I forget the exact abnormality, and I said, that is incredible. The guy lost money for the day, scooped you up, and brought you to the ER. And I said, what was that doctor's name? He goes, I can't remember. You can't remember a guy who scooped you up and brought you to the hospital in his own car. And that patient actually just left me about 3 months before. So they will move on. You are important, but it's not everything. You just have to educate both yourself that they'll get past you, as well as your patients that this next person is going to be great. And so we did a lot of that. And I think we ended up with even a little more than I had before I sold it to him. So I feel really good about that. He didn't lose out on patients because it was an exodus when I left.
That's really important to hear, especially because, as the DPC movement has grown since the 90s, that's going to happen to doctors when they choose to retire from DPC as we go into the future. So that's really important to hear. And, the strategy that you took in terms of the video, especially adapting during COVID times, I think that's really cool, just because it is seeing a person without a mask on these days is definitely not a common thing, especially here in California. Yes. So the idea of a personality coming through a video, at least it's a way for a patient to get that meet and greet in lieu of an in-person meeting. So that's fantastic.
I'm a big believer in that. What you need to constantly, I know I put this in my books, but especially the churn book, you need to constantly be showing your patients that you're giving them value, and that I believe I did a weekly newsletter. I did videos with another doctor I helped open his practice in town. We did videos regularly, and on COVID, we did up to I think 28 COVID updates before I left, where we talked about the information, and patients ate that up and loved it. You know what? When they see that bill coming across every month, they want to know, what am I paying this for? And that was one of the reasons. They're seeing my newsletters, and they're seeing I'm filtering some of the garbage information out there, even about COVID and my videos. And so that's why this new doc was just an extension of that. I believe everybody should be doing that, especially if you want to curb the churn. But you'll have to get there to understand that why.
Can you share a little bit about strategies that you find could help others in their DPC journeys?
Well, so there's different things. So one is you got to get patients there, right? And so, whether that's getting out there, getting interviews by newspaper. So let's say you build your practice that way. You also have to deliver a great product. You can't have a crappy office. It has to be clean. It has to have good customer service. Your staff person needs to be awesome. You need to be kicking ass like you're better than any other practice, and DPC gives you the edge in doing that, and also you really truly care about that. So once you got a great practice and you're getting patients coming in, sometimes something called hedonistic adaptation occurs, where people start taking things for granted. That's just life. People's relationships they take for granted. And so they'll start, they'll come in, you sew up their leg with 40 stitches, and they're like, yeah, I think I'm not going to pay for this anymore. It's like, dude, you didn't realize that was an $800 bill. And so you can do it in a way, and I was doing it, not every time, but if I did a big procedure, I would send them an email, hey, we love saving our patients money, and this is what it would have cost you. And I had a resource that I can look up and said, here's this I&D would have cost you $600 or whatever. It's just so they know that, right? So because they forget, they forget that if you treated someone's back, I actually am an MD that did OMT, that costs $150. And so I think it's important to show that, and I think it's important to understand that hedonistic adaptation does occur in life and in DPC, and they will take you for granted, like, why would you leave? Well, I hardly ever show up. Yeah, that's not true. In the last year, the first 6 months, you showed up 25 times, and that would have. So just because you didn't do it in the second part of the year doesn't mean you didn't show up, and they just forget. So there's ways to do it that's not rude, and that's not going to turn them off. And I put them all in that churn book. So I think it's important, and I think you mentioned also my consumer guide to primary care. It's my consumer guide to primary care because I use a model that's used in other industries. The marketing expert is Joe Polish, but I use that for primary care, and it's a way off my website that you could just get that free as a download. And I think he's still using it. The guy took over, Dan Swartz, and changed his name. And I'm welcome anybody to just change your name and change the stuff that I put on there and keep it for yourself. But it's on his website now, so I may have to put that on the DPC book website. That's something that I need to do. So anybody can take that and then tweak it around, because it's a great educational guide to show you all the ripoffs and garbage of a fee-for-service practice and why such a practice as DPC is so much better. And by the way, you can join now. So it's another way of marketing. I think it's a really great concept. I didn't make it up, but I copied it with their Joe Polish allowed people to do that, and I copied it, and it worked really well. It's a way to get people to listen. They got to see. There's so much information out there. They have to see. They used to say, well, you got a sales pitch, elevated pitch is not going to do it. You need the touch point of like 7 times before someone joins. It may take 50 times now with all the information out there. And so you have to be patient. And I was always amazed at people joining 3 years after seeing an article about me in the paper. So these things are important to get information out there. If your website sucks and doesn't educate well, if you don't have a Facebook presence, if you don't have an Instagram presence, and on, and you're not using ways to get your information out there, they're not going to know about you. So I guess that's my little tidbits. The rest of it you can see in my books.
The information that you have in your consumer guide, it's timeless. You didn't write this last year, and yet the common complaints that patients have about their primary care office, the ripoffs that patients experience, the misconceptions, especially about primary care and education of doctors. I mean, these are constantly affecting patients every single day, and this will likely continue in the future as, you know, the insurance world exists. So I think that it's very powerful. If a DPC doctor is developing their practice or established, and one of the things they have thought about is dabbling in community involvement or sharing about DPC with others, especially people who are like medical students or residents, how would you encourage them, or how would you guide them in terms of reaching out to the community and sharing about the movement?
Always, this is good or bad, only doctors, medical students, residents would rotate through my practice, right? Nurse practitioners, nurses, you know, and because I think that's competition that's not unfair, and I have an issue with training right now in education claiming equality, and it is not the same. I lost my youth to medicine. You know, I lost paid a lot of money to get to the point. And people are now saying, "Oh, I can do it too," and that's not the same thing. And that's not saying there's not a role for mid-levels, but to say you're the same as me is unfair and devalues everything I've been through. So we really just had medical students and residents rotate through, but also any other doctors. And they come for a half day. I always open my door to anybody who want to learn about DPC, because even in my community, I wanted the DPC docs. In fact, the other guy in my community, Andrew Anderson, is a DO, and I actually tried to contact him because he was new at a practice and never got in touch with them. And he found me one day and was going to be signing with another practice, and I sat with him for 2 hours, and by the end, he says, "I'm going to DPC." And I actually helped him open his practice. We gave everything, all my books, we gave everything we can. His wife shadowed, he shadowed, and he's extremely successful now. And we cross-covered, and now he's cross-covering for the new guy. And you know what? My practice did not expand much more after that because he was siphoning some patients off, because that's just reality. They were living on that part of town, and it's okay. Again, we help each other out. So the goal is a very simple thing. In DPC, it's the most supportive community there is, and you want to pay it forward. People need to pay it forward. And so I don't care where you're at, try to help others into DPC, because that is what you know as pure medicine. You're helping others in a one-on-one, more time. You're doing a better job because you have more time. We need to spread the word. This is a great career, even if it affects you a little bit financially. And if we shouldn't be competing and hurting each other, but we can, have similar prices, and let's just make this thing grow. And, a rising tide floats all boats. So yes, I always helped anybody want to stay and see. I probably had 15 doctors from all different states come spend half a day with me and just to learn how to do it. And we always had the door open. And everybody in DPC should do the same thing. I would be pissed if someone was a jerk about it. In fact, and this is my opinion, I've always let people copy my website, anything they want to copy, and the consumer guide, because why not? Well, how is that hurting me? Right? I want to help others. So yeah, we should be doing that. And then once we get that word out there, it's more accepted. People, you think people know about DPC, the population, they don't. They still don't know enough about it.
The weeks before my maternity leave, I literally spent most of my visit time with patients discussing about the insurance won't cover that. And the idea that cash pay is an option for people, especially like a coronary calcium score, I can get it for $125 locally. People have to drive for it, but they were like, but my insurance doesn't cover that, was the common question. And so the idea that it is not mainstream yet, and that we can do our part to help make it mainstream and to help communities realize the true value in us as doctors and us as direct primary care doctors, it absolutely is important for people to hear. That's wonderful that you were able to get so many doctors in your clinic. I mean, COVID be damned, because it throws a ratchet in the spokes right now. But I think that is important for people to hear also, because that is one of my goals, is to reach out to Creighton students someday. I hope to say that you need to experience life outside of RVUs.
And we can do that. And so, and what are we gaining out of that? We're not raising the cost of medicine. We're actually lowering the cost of medicine. We're not helping ourselves. We're actually helping others. I mean, it's all altruistic. That's the beauty of DPC. I don't know but a few people, I think, that are not altruistic in DPC and are really great. That's why those conferences, when they're live again, are freaking awesome, because people love each other.
That is so true. And my first conference was at the Hint Summit, and people would probably advise me that that's probably the third of the three that you should go to. But just hearing these doctors talk about DPC and what they're doing for the future of DPC, I thought it was a great place to start. You can start anywhere, but for me, I was so grateful that you really got to feel that DPC spirit. Doug, I want to ask, because you have such a global view on DPC and you've lived DPC, in addition to your books, resources that you would recommend people checking out, no matter where they are in the DPC journey?
I think that at this point, the DPC Alliance really has organized as much as they could. There's some other good books out there. Paul Thomas has a startup book. That's fine. Shane Purcell has a great book on how to work with businesses. And again, the DPC Alliance, and then the conferences. You know, they each have a little bit of a slant. Sometimes they tick people off for whatever reason. I believe in the future the DPC Alliance is going to have their own conferences, and it'll be much more neutral, whether it's political or bought out by a third party. It won't be with DPC Alliance. And that's some of the concerns with some of the other conferences. But the getting together is the most important part as far as a one-on-one. So the best resource is hanging out with DPC docs that are in the field doing it already, and you get so much more confidence. The mastermind, I was at the North Carolina DPC Alliance mastermind, and it was great. We just all hung out and talked together and gave hints, and also gave confidence, and instilled confidence in each other, and those people needed our help. And there's so much out there for people. And if it's right for you, it's not right for everybody. But if it's right for you to jump into DPC, then you probably should have done it yesterday.
On that note, Doug, what is the best way for others to reach out to you?
Yeah, that's interesting, because I've kind of, I don't have an email, on DPC Startup. I tell you what, I have a blog that's been going for 20 years. I have 13 writers, and I usually blog once a week, but it's my blog. It's called authenticmedicine.com, and it's pretty popular. It's been around longer than it. Other than Kevin MD, been one of the longest ones. And so Doug at authenticmedicine.com, if they want to email me, I think it's on the website anyway, but authenticmedicine.com, they can find me there. And we just really talk, not all DPC, trust me, we kind of just call it like it is. And I give everybody of every political spectrum a voice, because everybody should be heard on that website. And so I think we do a good job with that. And that's just been a fun thing for me for doing that for 20 years. So they can find me there.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
I really appreciate it. I really appreciate what you're doing. I cannot wait for you to get your journey going. And in any way I can help you, just contact me.
Next week, look forward to hearing from Dr. Garrison Bliss. Until then, this is Maryal Concepcion. For more information on this episode and much more, please visit mydpcstory.com.